His voice rumbles like distant thunder across the desert. His mustache, his slow drawl, the way he stares down the horizon. Sam Elliott doesn't just play the cowboy. He is the cowboy. For 6 decades, Hollywood worshipped his image. Rugged, noble, timeless. But behind that granite jawline lies something darker, a quiet fury that has simmered for years. A fury born not of jealousy or ego, but of betrayal. Because while the world saw a gentleman, stoic, disciplined, carved from old Western dust, Sam Elliott saw something else taking shape in Hollywood. A new kind of actor, shiny, pretentious, manufactured. And one by one, 6 names burned themselves into his memory. Men he would never forgive. Men who, in his eyes, disrespected the very soul of acting itself. He never yelled, he never fought, but his silence was louder than a gunshot. At 80, Sam Elliott is done staying quiet. And when you hear the names of the 6 actors he secretly despised, you'll understand why the last cowboy in Hollywood decided to draw his line in the sand. For Sam Elliott, authenticity isn't an idea, it's a creed. Every line he delivers, every silence he holds, every scar on his face carries the truth of a life lived under open skies. He didn't learn the West, he was forged by it. Raised among ranch hands and dust storms, Sam believed that a man's worth was measured not by his fame, but by the dirt on his boots and the honesty in his eyes. So when Hollywood began turning the cowboy into a marketing brand, all polish, no soul, Sam's patience wore thin. And no actor represented that Hollywood cowboy better in his eyes than Kevin Costner. When Costner stepped into Wyatt Earp and later became the patriarch of Yellowstone, audiences hailed him as the modern face of the frontier. But to Sam, it was make-believe, a performance wrapped in perfect lighting and designer dust. He plays a rancher like it's dress-up, Sam once muttered to a close friend, like he's pretending to understand something he's never lived. Sam didn't hate Kevin Costner, the man. He hated what Costner symbolized, the West as decoration, not devotion. When Yellowstone became a cultural phenomenon, Sam was quietly invited to join the cast for a cameo. He turned it down flat. His voice was cold, final. "It's a soap opera in a cowboy hat," he said. To him, that refusal wasn't arrogance. It was protest. A man refusing to let Hollywood turn his heritage into spectacle. Because for Sam Elliott, the West wasn't about glory or glamour. It was about grit, about long silences, blistered hands, and the kind of truth that never needed to be explained. In his heart, he felt that Kevin Costner's version of the West was too clean, too staged, a postcard, not a portrait. And so the distance between the 2 men grew wider. They would share rooms, award shows, even handshakes, but every word between them was weighed. One producer remembered it perfectly. They never argued, but the silence between them could freeze a desert. And that silence was only the beginning. When The Power of the Dog premiered in 2021, critics called it a masterpiece, poetic, complex, and daring. But when Sam Elliott watched it, his jaw tightened. He didn't see art, he saw mockery. To him, the movie wasn't just a reinterpretation of the West, it was a distortion, a version built from theory, not truth. And when he saw Benedict Cumberbatch, elegant, British, polished to perfection, playing a rough Montana rancher, something inside Sam snapped. There was no pretense, no diplomacy. On a podcast appearance, his words came out like gunfire. "What the hell does this Brit know about the American West?" The comment echoed through Hollywood like a stampede. Fans of Cumberbatch called Sam outdated, arrogant, even bigoted. They said he was clinging to a bygone era, too stubborn to understand the art of reinvention. But Sam didn't care. He didn't apologize. He stood tall in the storm, unshaken, like a weathered oak in the wind. To him, the power of the dog betrayed everything the Western stood for. It traded grit for psychology, silence for symbolism, strength for fragility. It painted cowboys not as men of quiet integrity, but as broken, bitter relics. Sam didn't see the strengths of the frontier in Cumberbatch's performance. He saw theater, fragile, mannered, foreign. He saw an actor imitating a life he'd never lived, with an accent that made every word sound like artifice. "This isn't the West I knew," Sam told a friend privately. "It's the West through a curtain, soft, careful, and afraid to get dirty." The backlash was merciless, but Sam refused to retreat. He wasn't fighting a man. He was defending a code, the unwritten law of the cowboy that prized honesty over performance, substance over a spectacle. Cumberbatch chose silence. He never replied, but insiders say he was deeply hurt, blindsided by the sharpness of Sam's words. Studio executives begged Sam to clarify his comments. He never did, because to him, silence wasn't weakness. It was conviction. And while Hollywood debated whether Sam Elliott had finally gone too far, he simply dusted off his boots, looked to the horizon, and waited for the next storm. To Sam Elliott, acting was never about fame. It was about truth, about living inside a moment so honestly that the audience forgot they were watching a performance. But when the new generation of stars began chasing algorithms instead of emotion, Sam saw something sacred slipping away, and no one in his eyes embodied that decay more than Ashton Kutcher. When Sam first saw him rise to fame through that 70s show, he didn't scoff, he sighed. Kutcher had charm, confidence, timing, but to Sam, those things weren't enough. They were tools, not talent. And when Kutcher turned his celebrity into a business empire, diving into tech investments and brand building, Sam saw a man who'd turned craft into commerce. So when Netflix brought them together for The Ranch, it felt like two worlds colliding. The Last Cowboy standing shoulder to shoulder with Hollywood's golden entrepreneur. At first, Sam stayed quiet. He showed up, hit his marks, kept his professionalism intact. But behind the camera, tension rippled like a static in the air. Crew members whispered about the silence between them. Heavy, unspoken, impossible to ignore. "He's a good guy," Sam was overheard saying once, "but he's no actor." It wasn't Kutcher's personality that bothered him. It was his approach. To Sam, Ashton represented a Hollywood obsessed with speed and spectacle, where acting was measured by engagement rates, not emotional truth. What others called innovation, Sam called erosion. The craft, he told a friend, isn't supposed to be convenient. He watched Kutcher glide through takes with ease, charming, spontaneous, marketable. But to Sam, it all felt hollow, like watching someone wear the skin of a storyteller without carrying its weight. Kutcher, ever the diplomat, praised Sam publicly, calling him a mentor and a legend. But behind that polite respect, the gap between them was unbridgeable. Sam wasn't bitter, he was protective. Protective of a code that valued silence over sound bites, integrity over influence. Because to him, the screen wasn't a billboard, it was a mirror of the soul. And in that mirror, Sam saw fewer and fewer reflections worth believing in. For Sam Elliott, true acting doesn't shout, it whispers, it lingers in the silence between words. In a single glance, heavy, with meaning. That was the art he believed in, control, restraint, the kind of power that draws the audience closer instead of overwhelming them. So when Nicolas Cage exploded onto the screen, wild, unpredictable, emotions bursting at every seam, Sam didn't see brilliance, he saw chaos. To him, Cage was everything acting shouldn't be. Loud, erratic, and desperate to be noticed. More firework than flame, Sam once said, quietly to a friend. Bright, loud, and gone in a second. Their paths crossed on Ghost Rider, where Sam played the weary mentor and Cage, the tormented hero. On camera, they burned bright together. Off camera, the air between them was cold, polite, professional, but distant. Cage's intensity filled every room. He performed not just for the camera, but for the world. Every gesture exaggerated, every emotion oversized. To some, it was genius. To Sam, it was indulgence. In later interviews, Sam never named names, but his words cut like a spurs. There are actors, he said, who make every scene about themselves, like they're fighting the story instead of serving it. Those who knew him didn't have to guess who he meant. For Sam, the craft was sacred. It wasn't about grabbing attention, it was about earning it. And Cage's performances, to him, were the opposite. Showmanship disguised as sincerity. While critics hailed Cage's unhinged brilliance and fans worshipped his unpredictability, Sam stayed unmoved because to him, greatness didn't need to scream. It breathed. Quietly, honestly. He once told a friend over a late drink, real acting doesn't chase the spotlight, it carries its own light. And in that single sentence, you could feel everything Sam Elliott stood for. The dignity of stillness, the poetry of control, the humility of craft. In a world that celebrated a spectacle, Sam remained loyal to silence, because silence, when used right, says everything. There was a time when Sam Elliott and Jeff Bridges seemed carved from the same piece of weathered oak. Two men who didn't act like cowboys, they lived like them. Their voices were soft but steady, their presence calm yet commanding. They didn't need monologues or theatrics to fill a scene, just a look, a breath, a silence. When they stood together in The Big Lebowski, audiences felt something almost spiritual. Two souls perfectly in tune, grounded in honesty and unspoken understanding. Off-screen, their friendship was just as genuine. They laughed like brothers, shared old stories, and believed in the same simple code, integrity above all else. But time changes everything, even the men who once seemed unshakable. When Jeff Bridges won his long-awaited Oscar for Crazy Heart, Sam applauded like everyone else. But quietly, something shifted. The Jeff he once knew, the humble craftsman who let his work speak for him, began to fade into something more polished, more Hollywood. He became harder to reach. He spoke more in interviews than in quiet moments. He appeared on red carpets with political slogans, spoke about movements, not movies. And though his intentions may have been pure, Sam felt something precious slipping away. It wasn't jealousy, one close friend said later. It was heartbreak. Sam wasn't angry that Jeff had changed. He was grieving the loss of the man he used to know, the one who believed that a man's worth came from his word, not his image. In one rare interview, Sam was asked about old friends in Hollywood. He paused for a long moment, then said quietly, "Some folks change, others just show who they always were." No names, no accusations, but everyone knew. The bond between them, once so natural and unspoken, faded into silence. They stopped appearing together at festivals. They stopped mentioning each other in interviews. What was once a brotherhood turned into a memory wrapped in regret. To outsiders, it looked like nothing happened. But to Sam, it felt like losing family. And that quiet ache, that slow, irreversible distance, stayed with him longer than any feud or betrayal. Because sometimes the hardest kind of hatred is the one born from love that couldn't survive the noise. For Sam Elliott, acting was never meant to be a circus. It was sacred, an invisible handshake between the performer and the audience. You didn't need to scream to be heard, and you didn't need to suffer to be real. But then came Jared Leto, Hollywood's poster child for method madness. When Leto's name started filling headlines for mailing dead rats to co-stars, living in character for months and turning film sets into psychological battlegrounds, Sam Elliott didn't see genius, he saw theater pretending to be art. "That's not acting," Sam once muttered to a friend. "That's ego with a costume." To him, the craft wasn't supposed to demand attention. It was supposed to disappear into truth. But Leto's approach made the performance louder than the story itself. Every role became an event, every transformation a marketing campaign. Hollywood called it dedication. Sam called it delusion. He didn't care how many Oscars Leto won or how many critics praised his intensity, because for Sam, no golden statue could justify losing respect for the quiet discipline that defines a real actor. If it takes that much effort for him to act, Sam reportedly told a friend, maybe he's in the wrong business. To Sam, Leto symbolized the final betrayal, the moment when acting stopped being about a storytelling and became about self-worship, where emotion turned into exhibition and the truth got buried under performance art. He wasn't impressed by the madness or the myths. He wasn't moved by the chaos. He was irritated, not by the man, but by what he represented. A Hollywood that had forgotten its own soul. In Sam's world, you didn't need to torment yourself to reach greatness. You just needed to be honest. And as the industry applauded Leto's commitment, Sam quietly turned his back, walking further into the sunset of his career, alone, steady, and unbending, because for him, acting was never about transformation. It was about truth. And truth, he believed, never needed to perform. At 80 years old, Sam Elliott stands as one of the last men in Hollywood who still lives by an unwritten code, a relic of a world where words mattered, handshakes sealed promises, and silence spoke louder than speeches. He has no interest in trends, no hunger for approval. While others chase reinvention, Sam stays rooted in something deeper, the belief that truth doesn't age. To him, acting was never about lights, lenses, or red carpets. It was about character, not the ones you play, but the one you carry inside you. He's seen the West fade into nostalgia, watched cowboys turn into caricatures, and witnessed a generation of actors mistake noise for depth. And yet, through it all, Sam Elliott remains unmoved. The last man standing on a dusty frontier Hollywood forgot. He's not bitter. He's just tired of watching the art he loves be traded for applause. Sam once said, "A man's voice means nothing if it's not backed by truth. And if there's one thing he's never lost, it's the truth in his voice. That deep, graveled rumble that carries both strength and sorrow, wisdom and warning. Because beneath the hat and the mustache, beneath the silence and the stare, Sam Elliott isn't just an actor. He's a reminder of what this town used to be before it learned how to lie beautifully. He's the cowboy who never broke character because he was the character. And as the sun sets, on a changing Hollywood, Sam rides off, slow and steady, into the long horizon, leaving behind 6 names, 6 lessons, and a legacy that will never be forgotten. Because in a world full of noise, Sam Elliott's silence still echoes the loudest.